about November. I've got no specific time for digging the tubers up, but I like to get them up before Christmas, obviously, because there's plenty of work to do on them. I trim all the loose roots off I give them a good wash off. That's get the worst of the mud off them. As you can see, the worst of the mud has gone off of these after they've been dug up, and then just a general get the loose trimming done off them, cut the growing bits off, and then I split them completely in half from the main stem. So there we've got worms and all. So there we've got the tuber cut completely in half. I now cut the worst of the stem off. And the object is to get the finger tubers as I can from it, so that I can then have single roots like this with an eye on them. So we've cut it in half, and now we'll get it down a bit further yet. Normally you can see next year's eyes coming as we're going along. The whole object of me is to get rid of the stem, the part that goes wrong. You need an array of knives and cutters and all those sorts of things for this job, and you couldn't dream of doing it without getting the worst of the dirt off, obviously, first. There we've got one here with an eye on it, which I can cut right off. And we're left with just a small finger that we will store and produce our cuttings for next year. Now I normally dip the ends of that in there just for now, and we'll leave that one there. These couple have already been done. When I've got all of the ends together, when I've got all the chicken legs together, and we call them chicken legs in England, when I've got all the chicken legs together, I then naturally do one variety at a time, and I normally get a mixture of, well, some people call it bleach. Bleach is the name of the stuff. Bleach. I normally get a mixture of bleach, about 10% bleach and water, and soak these in just in case there's any old slug eggs or anything on them. After that, they go into the water and have another good wash, so that we're finishing up with just a clean chicken leg. I can then write the name on it. I've got one here with the name written on it, as you can see here. Now you can see the name coming up nice and clear there, and that's what will actually be stored. These chicken eggs are what we'll actually be storing in the thing. They have a last dip into the flowers of sulphur, and then they're ready to just be kept ready for propagation next January. From a typical tuber you would get possibly 6, 8 or 10 even chicken legs of this description that we will be able to keep okay. Never any problem in keeping fingers of tubers like this. There is never any problem. There's another nice one with some nice eyes on it. The important thing is to make sure that it's nice and sound when you do it. Now all these will be ready to go into the bleach. The tubers, once they're named up, are then put into, straight out of the bag, I use 3M, the Levington that comes just straight out of the bag, no messing about with it, into one of these plastic seed trays, and just firm them in, not completely buried, half in, half out. There we go. A label with it, of course, so that you know the variety. Again, just firmed in. Note the ends are still well covered there. One label. There we are. Now she's all ready. That'll be watered in now and put onto the sand bed, which has got a soil warming cable in it, and that will give the nice warmth that it wants to get them started. They'll be going on there, and I should think it's now January, and I would think that they will be coming about another 2 or 3 weeks. We'll start seeing the eyes popping out, and the cuttings will be coming along in February. It's now mid-February, and you can see that some of them are throwing up cuttings already. And here we've got a shoot really gone to town, and I'll be able to take that cutting off that one already. As you can see, some of these have got more than one eye, and that eye has come from the bottom. That's most probably why it's flown away there, but there's another 2 eyes there. So often you get 2 or 3 or even 4 eyes from one of these little chicken legs. And once the cuttings are taken, of course, further cuttings will come along then. I normally take most of my cuttings from the end of February until March and April. That would be when I take most of my cuttings. I take the cuttings in the normal manner, which we'll see in a minute, but the medium that I root them in is mainly sharp sand, as you can see there. A small amount of peat or Levington, a small amount of Levington with 2 or 3 handfuls, but that's all. It's mainly sharp sand. The one disadvantage with this is that, of course, you do have to keep them reasonably well watered. But before I start a tray, I'll fill it with the medium, then I'll water it in, give it a good watering in, get the old trowel and just level him down. I'm now ready to start taking the cuttings, and I take all of my cuttings with a scalpel, with these small blades that you can buy at stationers and those sort of places. You saw, of course, that these were chicken legs. This is a different box of chicken legs, but chicken legs are just the same. And we'll now take the cuttings off this particular variety, which just happens to be Kinora Moonbeam. It's a new variety. As most of you know, I grow varieties from all over the world on trial. And so, of course, lots of these varieties aren't on the market yet. Nevertheless, they soon will be if they're any good. The bottom leaves are taken off, and I usually take the cutting just below the leaf node, so, and that one's ready. Yeah, well, you've got 2 choices here. We could take it down here, or we could have, of course, gone up a notch, but I'm quite happy with that. A lot of people leave those leaves on, I don't. And I think it's like all things in dahlia growing. If it suits you, carry on with it. Right, there we go. So there's the 4 cuttings already, and lots of people use a rooting hormone. I do. There's lots on the market, and I wouldn't say that any are any better than the other. There's, of course, powder, Ceradex rooting powder. There's Rooter, which I use, a Rooter liquid. In fact, I've even tried out another one now, another type of liquid, but this is the one I mainly use, Rooter. I honestly don't think it matters what you put them in. I think you could dip them in Bob Martins or anything like that. It's just to seal the end off at the bottom. So we dip them in. There you go. Now, I know a lot of people like a softer medium so they can push their cuttings in, but I like to dibble mine in. And so there we go, first one's in. And I do them in rows, and I always put the label at the front of the variety. There we go. Now that variety will get a label Kinora Moonbeam and the date. but I shall take the whole of this box now, so the box will be the same date. But just Kinora Moonbeam will be written on there. Now often I get varieties come in later than when I'm normally taking cuttings, and this is a variety in instance. The variety is called Mr. Ralph. It's from America. It's a medium decorative, and I don't really want to do trays of cuttings anymore, so I do them round pots now. Exactly the same mix, mainly sharp sand, water it in, and we can take that pot full of cuttings from Mr. Ralph. Same procedure, just clean off the cuttings and into the router, and then this time they're put round the pot instead of in lines. They're just put round the pot. Now they're stood on the soil warming cable again, and within a short while they'll be rooted. Especially now there's a lot more light, they'll root a lot faster. It's one of the problems you get. People send you varieties, sometimes they come just as you're ready to plant out, and of course naturally all you can do then is pop the chicken leg in the ground and hope for the best. Just clean water, nothing else, just clean water, and they'll be sprayed about 4 or 5 times a day. While I'm here I do them when I come in the morning. Well, I do them a couple of times in the morning, I do them at lunchtime, and I do them when I come home from work at night, and during the day Evelyn usually does them for me as well, so they get a fair percentage of spraying, and that keeps them nice and fresh. And of course it's what you've got to do if you don't when you're using mainly sharp sand, because they do tend to dry out very quickly, especially on soil warming cables. Now 1 or 2 of these that we that we potted up later in small pots because they'd come in late should have just about started to root now. Let's try them. Not much root on him, not a lot of root, not much root, but just beginning to get their roots on them. They really want a few more days. Yes, they could do with a few more days. There's not quite enough root on them yet, but they don't take long this time of the year. If I get 1 or 2, and I sometimes do, that just don't root, what I normally do is just put them in a piece of water, in a small bit of water, and you'll see the roots come like mad just in the water, and then just pot them up in the normal manner. This variety is a seedling from Bud Moore, as it so happens, but they come just the same, and then they're potted up in the normal manner. I pot up in Levington. I throw a bit of perlite in it normally. I haven't got any at the moment, but I do throw it in normally, and a bit of grit. But at this time of the year they're not going to be in these very long. I would think it's now sort of May, so this will only be in there 2 or 3 weeks, and it'll be gone. It'll be planted in the ground. But again, it's got to have its label, and so of course the label goes in with the thing. It's watered in, and that'll be okay. That can stand in the greenhouse now for a couple of weeks, and that will be a nice little plant to plant out. Like most of you, I'm always struggling for cold frame space at this time of the year. Always bursting at the seams, mainly because well, we grow too many plants, don't we? But there's plant sales and all these different type of people calling for us for plants, and we've got the added problem this year that we're planting lots of beds at Ebbw Vale. So of course I've got lots of plants here that are going down to Ebbw Vale. Mainly I make if I've got 2 brick cold frames, but I make up temporary cold frames with straw bales. Just simple straw bales, just put down to make a square, and then I put plastic sheets over the top and weigh them down with pieces of iron or whatever if the need occurs. It's easy to throw a tarpaulin over those if there's a shout for frost. They're no particular type. Lots of these are new varieties from all over the world. All this particular frame are new varieties. They're all ready to go out in the beds over to the far side. I've got seedlings in the far cold frame right over there. There'll be all my own seedlings are in those cold frames, and the exhibition material that I'm going to grow is mainly in that far lot there and in the cold frames in that corner. It's a general hodgepodge, and I'm not that methodical, but I do tend to get it right on the day. No added feed goes into these beds at all, because come June I'll get 25 tonne of manure, and I shall wheel it in. It'll be the other side of that brick wall there, and I shall wheel it in, and of course that will be a mulch, and that is what's dug in every winter. So the whole of this bed gets 25 tonne of cow manure, and that's dug in the winter, and that provides the goodness for the following years. Okay, people say, well, you should use other things than that, but it works. So, you know, it's like I said to you earlier, if a thing works for you in the Dahlia world, carry on and do it. Plenty of water, which of course is going to be a real problem this time of the year, because we're already on a drought order in this area. But we've had a tremendous rainstorm this morning, which of course has got the big smile back onto my face, and most probably lots more gardeners. Well, I shall normally plant out the first week in June. I know lots of people are already planted out now, and you'll hear people have planted out sort of sometime in May and that, but I normally plant out the first week in June. I believe we've got a frost the first, not a frost, a new moon the first 3 days of June, so they're the days to watch. So I should be watching it closely, and I'll only put out enough that I can cover with a bit of fleece or one of these things. From the middle of next week, no problems at all. Out they'll all go, and I hope to be finished planted by next weekend. This tool's a plant tool. It picks the earth up and just takes it out, just like that. And then we go along. The plants are all ready to plant. Label goes behind the cane, and in they go. I like to leave a little dish around it, just so that the water can collect around the plant there. Now we notice the name came out the pot there, Klondike. So the same name will go on the top of the stake. I always put the label on the top of the cane. So I've got 2 labels on every plant. Klondike again, as you can see, it's a large semi-cactus, white from America, new this year. Now, I've never kept any records of anything really. This is my Bible, this board. This board has got just numbers on it, and I number it 1 to 100 every year. As the days go by to the national, that's 1 day to the national. Right at the top is number 1 day to the national, and I work backwards. I started at 100, that was when I first put the first plants in. It's now 94, last day of June, and it's last day of May, sorry, and it's 94 days to the national. Everything will depend on that now. I shall think about stopping things around about the 77th day. These days obviously will be rubbed out by then. When I get to about the 77th day, 11 weeks from the national, I shall start stopping the dahlias, and I shall stop them right down then to 70, around the 10 weeks to the national. It will give me my bud dates when I get round about 36, 35, 34, 33. All these will be bud dates when I want buds for the national. I shall start mulching from this as well, somewhere around about 65. Usually about then I start mulching, which is usually at the end of June, and always Wimbledon week when I start mulching. This is the whole secret to my timing. Everything's done off for that board, and I don't keep any records at all, just 1 to 100 every year and work my way back. Any day you can come to me and say, how many days is it to the national, and I'll tell you, because I just open the door and have a look, and that will be it. Now, we've really finished planting out the last few. I just put the last one in, as you saw. But it's now important to keep the plants free from slugs, because being young and tender, they will be attacked. And this is, I always use plenty of slug pellets. I fling them about just like as though I'm feeding chickens, and that's really it then. They're now going to go, and I shall now keep them hoed all round them, keep them well hoed, and of course well watered. We've got a problem, of course, because we've got a water ban here, and we've had a water ban for 2 years. But I collect water all winter, so, and all of my water stored in these big blue drums right the way around the garden, and you'll find plenty of these big blue drums wherever you go. I've been collecting water for the last 6 months. The plants are going away now, and it's very important to keep the hoe going around the plants to keep the weeds down. And of course it's time to start stopping the dahlias. Being about 11 weeks to the national, about 77 days now, the leading growing point comes out, which, there we go, take the top right out, and that will induce the breaks to come. Now this being a giant, the variety is Clyde's Choice. This being a giant will be grown 3 up, and it's a reasonably late flower, so it's one of the first I shall stop. I'll be stopping for the next week right down to about 70 days, but this is always one of the first ones I shall stop. So it's 11 weeks from now to the national, so it's 77 days. You notice of course I've started to tie as well. I've got my first ties on. These are the ties around my neck, and that's a job I always do during the winter. I buy baler twine that the farmers use and cut it up into lengths, and that works out right through the season. I've got it all cut up. It's a job I don't have to do. Soon these laterals will start coming away from, now I've stopped it, that'll induce the side shoots to come away, and then I shall select 3. This being a giant, I shall grow it 3 to the plant, and I shall select the 3 strongest ones, and that will be the ones I shall get the flowers on. It's now the end of June, and it's time I got mulching. Now this is one of the most important jobs in my opinion. I've been hoeing the ground regularly now since I planted, and they've been in now about 5-6 weeks, and it's now time to get some manure around them. This is my only feed. This is what I regularly use. I use cow manure. This is cow manure, and I put it round, pack it right the way round the plants. I usually use about 25 tonne each year. I have 25 tonne delivered, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through it now. This long bed's one of the last to do now. I obviously load it into the wheelbarrows by a fork, but I've put everything else round by hand. So the 25 tonnes all gone through the horse and through the cow, and now through my hands. I just pack it all around the plant so that the whole of the ground is covered. The important thing about mulching is you must get the ground wet before you start. It's most important that the ground is really soaked before you start. Again, a problem because of the hoses, but bucketfuls of water is the answer. Just keep throwing bucketfuls of water at it. We've been fortunate actually. We've had quite a nice little bit of rain recently, so that's helped to water the ground, but I've also added a few bucketfuls of water to it to give it a nice wetness, and now I should be wheeling the mulch around it. Now I said we'd look at and have a go at earwigs. This is what I use, tumblebug again. A jug mostly full of water, 2 capfuls of this in that small amount of water. Makes a really strong solution, because of course one of these capfuls does virtually a gallon, but 2 of those capfuls in there, deadly stuff. I just mix it up with a stick. I've then transferred it into this liquid, washing up liquid job, and what I do, I just go round and I squeeze it into the holes. Here they come. They're dead, or they will be any minute. Every hole's done. Surprising how you can see him, but he's finished. He's a goner. Now you'll see him come up out of this. They'll come out. Here they come. I do every cane. I've had 20 out of some of these holes, but it's sudden death. They're all gone. All that family is wiped out. Every cane gets done. I don't miss any canes. I used to do this with paraffin, but of course the problem was the paraffin used to drop on and sometimes hit the buds, and of course then that would blacken the buds and it was a wasted flower. But I thought about the old concentrated tumblebug, and this is what I've done ever since. Look at him, just finished. And now I've done every cane I own in one night. You need a dry night, because of course Some of the canes want a bit of filling up, but once they're filled up, that's it. Our buds have started to arrive now in earnest, and soon there'll be such an explosion of colour. But if we want to show these, we've got to do something about them. You can see they're moving about, and we want to get them stems like rods and also looking in the right direction. Possibly a little bit clock face, that one, and we want it looking up a nice angle. What do? Right, a little pad on the end of the stick. There we go. A rubber band. There's your pad. Now it goes 3 twist-its. Up under the bud. First one goes about halfway down, and you can tighten him. The next one goes at the bottom of the stick, and again you can tighten that one. Now the top bud, the top tie is just left loose. Now there's a reason for that. It's just left loose because this footstalk will still elongate until that bud is full of colour and flipping its petals. So as that does that, I shall gradually work it up and tighten it, and when it's finally flipped, then I shall tighten it completely. The job is not complete unless you put your smear of Vaseline around the stem. Just ordinary Vaseline, as cheap Vaseline as you can buy, any sale price or anything. I used to buy it wholesale at one time in big drums, but no problem at all. Just put it straight round the stem, round the stick, round the stem, round everything, just like a grease band on a tree. Now you saw me having a real go at earwigs earlier on. You know, the devil still try and come back. Although we've eradicated 90% of the population, there'll be 1 or 2 of their relations still about. So once that starts getting nice and juicy for them, they'll be coming up there and eating it. But always remember, go round your stick as well, because they'll bypass the stem and come up the stick and eat it just the same. As it's about 6 weeks to the National, it's time to start thinking genuinely about buds of giant decoratives. Some of the giants take quite a long time, and some will take anything up to 36, 37 days from when you take the bud. This variety is called Mark Hardwick, and it's notorious for having a very short footstalk. Now that's okay, when you're later on I shall be taking them, but I have got plenty of time at the moment, as there's 6 weeks to the National, 42 days. So what I shall do on this particular case, I shall grow it on a side bud. So I'll take the main bud out, the centre bud. So I'll take him right out completely. That is the bud that would have flowered, but it would have had a short stem, a short footstalk. Now those are the 2 buds that are left. That will be the first one, that will be the second one. That one will come about 3 days before that one. All you do, actually, you gain about 4 days on that one and about 7 days on that one. So I'm going to gain the 4 days and take that one out. So that bud will now be the first one, and of course it will give me a decent stem. That's the important thing. With a giant, I strip it right the way down. I've already taken some of these side shoots out, but that will be stripped completely to the ground. There's 3 plants, 3 blooms on this bush, 1, 2, 3, and there'll be absolutely nothing else to come, because I shall eventually crawl through these on my hands and knees and take every side bud out. So there'll be nothing in there whatsoever except that, and all the goodness will come up in that, and hopefully that will flower round about 2 or 3 days before the National with a bit of luck. It's a very slow developer, this type of thing is. Now some of these are already taken on the side bud, as you can see. Now there's one, you can see he's been taken on the side bud, centre bud gone, and there's the side bud now, and he's gradually fattening up. He'll be, well, you can see he's got to be about 3 or 4 days in front of this bud. And of course I've got plenty more to take yet, and I've got some in front of that bud. So you aim to get a succession of blooms all the time. But with this particular type, and with any type that are short stemmed, especially in giants, get them on the side bud if you can. You lose very little size, and you don't lose any refinement either. And I've often had blooms that are equally as good as, you know, from their centre buds. We're now coming towards the National, and soon the buds will be bursting, as this one is now. All the stem is been fixed with its pad, all the twist-its are tightened up, the Vaseline's in place, as it's been there now for a couple of weeks, and that bud's going to take about 14 days before it flowers. Now what are we going to do with it? Are we going to cover it, or are we going to let it just grow? It will of course just grow and make a flower, and it will suffer whatever comes down. The rain, the sun will bleach it, being a dark red. The variety is Zorro, and this is the sort of thing that we use. This is an individual cone, as you can see, made up from plastic, just on 3 short canes, just a bit of plastic and twisted round, in fact a plastic bag. Now I normally put my canes round it, but separate canes. Three canes does the job, and I usually use long canes for this job. Right down over the bloom. Now to twist it, hold the hat on in place with the big canes, against the big canes. I put 2 twistits on each cane, and that locks it. Now, it doesn't matter what sort of storm you get or wind, if you've done this job properly, you've got no problems. You must remember to put 2 on and lock it. Lock the 2 together. Final check to make sure that the bloom's in the centre, not touching anything. If it is, out with a knife and the string and tie it back to wherever you want it. That bloom's bang right, and that's no problem, nice and firm. There's a bit of give in it, but that's just as it should be, because the wind will take that, and that's covered perfectly. In about 14 days time you'll be able to look under that hat. No problems from the earwigs, because of course you Vaseline the stem. You've already put the mixture into all these open canes, and the sticks up it, so it'll have a nice straight stem. And in about 14 days time you can come along with your knife and cut that, and let's hope you've got a winner. Now this variety is Reginald Keen. It's large semi-cactus, and it's one of the most popular varieties and is a top exhibition variety. It's also excellent in the garden as well, but it is a first-class exhibition variety. The blooms are carried on tremendous stems, as you can see, first-class stems, and it's always got good form. I grow this variety 4 to the plant, and the cuttings were taken about March and planted at the end of May, and this is what you normally get. I've never had much problem with this variety. It's one of the easy growers, I would say. It always grows to about this height. As you can see, it's about 4 feet, around about 4 feet high, and is a nice clean grower. It's important to to keep the the blooms away from each other, not to touch while you're growing them, and it's also important to make sure that the blooms have got good centres naturally, but I never would anyone with a bad centre I'd pull out. It's very free flowering and normally flowers round about the end of August, beginning of September, which is of course what you want for shows. I did early on in this season have a certain amount of problem with this variety. It wasn't a problem that I've ever had before. I had the first touch of it last year, and I had it this year again, and that was with powdery mildew. This was a variety that you see some of these spots on the bottoms of the leaves. Now this really attacked this variety early on, and I had the problem last year, and I went to the people at Wisley and they told me Nimrod tea was the answer to it. Well, I sprayed it with Nimrod tea, but it wasn't really the answer. I sprayed it twice a week with Nimrod tea for the first week, and I thought, no, that's not the answer. So I tried some Cystane with it as well. So with alternate sprayings of Cystane and Nimrod tea, I finally quelled the damage. But it's one of those things you've got to watch for. It's a new phenomenon in the Dahlia world, especially in England, although my friends in Australia tell me it's not uncommon to them, but certainly it's new to us, and it's something we've got to look out for. So what I've actually done is Nimrod tea alternated with Cystane and sprayed according to the manufacturer's instructions, and that seemed to stop the damage. See some bigger blooms around the corner, but this is the colour, you can see of the colour. This one is Rydell Prince, again a new one on the market this year, but we've got some big blooms of it on the other side over there. And then we come to Kids Climax, most probably the most famous of the giant decks, always a regular with all exhibitors of giant decks. We haven't got any full blooms out at the moment, unfortunately for you to see, but this is the bed of it, always as clean as a whistle, and you can see that this variety has had no mildew whatsoever on it, although it was virtually opposite the one that we spoke about earlier with mildew. Very, very old variety. This variety was raised in 1952, so it's 40 years old, and is still classed by giant exhibitors to be one of the very best. The variety I'm looking at now is Ben Huston. You can see the enormous stems on it, just like walking sticks. But it's quite a good new giant. It's going right across the plot there. I think there's 3 plants there. Each plant has got 4. It's carrying 4 blooms, or will carry 4 blooms on it. These are the first blooms, and the bloom at the back is the farthest one forward. It's quite a sizable giant, and it's in a lovely gold colour, as you can see. It's raised by a friend of mine in Canada, Earl Huston, who named it after one of my grandsons. The lower variety that we get down here is called Enfield Salmon, a very, very old Australian variety, but a lovely colour and a lovely variety. It's a large decorative, and funny enough, I've got a sport on it this year which is pink, but we shall have to see if I can keep it. The next variety we're coming to is this one here. This is Billy Medford, another new variety from America, named after one of the best growers in Southern California. Oh no, I forget the state for a minute, but however, named after Billy Medford, and he certainly is a nice looking bloom. I haven't had a full bloom out yet. They're the first blooms I've had, and you can see some more coming out over there. It comes from South Carolina. I'm fixing to twist it on this variety. This one is called Como Poly. Como Poly is from Australia, and it's a large decorative. You can see the nice, that bloom's not fully finished yet, but that will be just about right for the National on Wednesday. That's quite a normal sort of size growing variety. It doesn't grow too tall, what, 4 foot, something like that, and they're grown 4 to the plant. They're from Australia, and they're a good show variety, I would say. The next lavender one we've got here, these ones here, they're Clint's Climax. That's a South African variety. We don't get too many good varieties from South Africa, but this one is a good one, and I'm growing it as a large. I'm growing it 4 or 5 to the plant, but it can be grown to giant size as well if you strip it down to 3 to the plant. When we get to the red one there, we're looking at Kinora Wildfire. This is another one that can be grown to a giant size, but I'm growing it to a large size here. And very nice red. Tends to be a late flowering variety, as you can see by the massive green in front of you. And lots of these are only just coming into bud now. The first variety here, the one that's a much brighter red, this one is Kinora Valentine, and another large decorative. Both the Kinoras, in fact all Kinoras, are raised by Gordy LaRue from Everett in Washington State in America. Coming to the other side now, we come to most probably one of the most famous families in the world in giant growers, with giant growers. This is the Alvis family, raised by Vernon Frost in New Zealand, and this is Alvis Supreme. This is the daddy of them all. This is the actual family where it started, and the name Alvis came from his daughter, was the name of his daughter, the daughter's second name. It has sported, and it's got a pale one, which is Cream Alvis. All the light coloured blooms in the front are Cream Alvis. There's a full-size bloom right over the far side there, I can see. And the one in the middle is White Alvis. This is the sport of it. This is the sport from Alvis, Cream Alvis, White Alvis. They're the 3 of them, and they're all first-class exhibition varieties. Most probably the most formationally perfect giant we've ever had. And then we come to an English raised one, which is nice to see. And of course this is possibly the top exhibition variety in giant decoratives, raised by Pi Ensom from Surrey, top exhibitor in his time and top raiser in the world most probably. And this is Hamari Gold. All his varieties are prefixed with the name Hamari, which is the name of his house. This variety that I'm standing by now is unnamed at the moment. It's unfortunately I don't know its name because it's a seedling, but it looks a very promising variety. It's a small semi-cactus, as you can see from these, very full, lots of petals, a different colour, and quite a reasonable amount of blooms, as you can see here. Now this came from Ed Red in America, in Washington State. He lives just outside of Tacoma. And he's normally known for giant decoratives, and of course he grows giant decoratives, but this is a very nice little cactus that I think will show very nicely indeed. All of these are quite a nice wealth of bloom, I thought, and a very interesting little cactus altogether. The variety behind it is another small cactus, but most of people will know that this is Lemon Elegance. This is a Dutch variety, very free flowering, very vigorous as well, but never grows very high, but throws up lots and lots of plant and lots and lots of flowers. It's one you've really got to work on all the time to get reasonable blooms. Otherwise you'll be swamped with the greenery. In the distance we can see a few more new varieties that are in the pipeline. The very bright pink one is called Neon City, which is from Dr. Hammett in New Zealand.
Good evening, Derek.
Hello there.
You've got a lot of stuff here tonight.
Yes.
How did you transport it? Do you find that difficult?
No, not really. I'm sort of used to transporting. It comes in these drums. I'll bring it in these drums, and I bring it in a transit van.
Oh, I see. You sort of hire that especially for the job, do you?
Well, no, it belongs to our firm and I borrow it.
Oh, I see. That's handy, that.
Yeah, it is handy, yeah.
Well, you certainly, after seeing them on the plot, you can't really appreciate it until you see them all massed together. Huh? What sort of exhibits are you making for tomorrow?
Well, we're mainly staging for the Herbert Brown, for the inter-society class. A lot of this will be go for the inter-society class. I'm also hoping to stage the Stuart Ogg Cup, and the few giants that are left I shall put in the colour classes, yes.
Yes. How do you fancy your chances this year?
Oh, you never know till you tomorrow morning. I'll tell you tomorrow.
A leading question. Well, you got some great stuff here, Derek, and I can only wish you luck for tomorrow and hope you do well.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
The Stuart Ogg, Mr. Derek Hewlett. Can I present this to you, Derek?
Thank you.
Well done.
This is Derek Hewlett's winning entry in the Stuart Ogg Challenge Cup, which calls for 6 different varieties of large decorative dahlias. There aren't a lot of good large decorative dahlias around, but Derek can turn out a damn good entry. And he features here the best giant or large flower bloom in the show, which is Clint's Climax, along with Silver City and Elmer B, and in the back vase Como Polly, Billy Medford and Spartacus. Very colourful entry in a section which is where it's not easy to find